Welcome back to the gay world of narcissism. It's TJ here, and tonight is story time once again. This is a story that incorporates elements of the Cluster B, and it's a real story. So I figured I would share because it's one of those strange stories that I never really got the answers for, which you'll find if you're dealing with human beings. You may experience the same situation. But it starts out when it was a long time ago. I was on my own, graduated from college, lived in my own apartment, my own space, and was happy with it. But I used to go to this local area that had nightclubs, and this particular nightclub was not a gay nightclub. It was like a rock and roll type place where bands would play, and I was because one of my coworkers was in a band who was playing there. So I agreed to go. And it's mostly straight boys, straight girls, but it had room for everybody. In this area, it was pretty much a mix wherever you go there. But just socializing with the people I knew there, and I couldn't help but noticing across the bar, it was like a big square bar, there was this guy sitting there, and he was like staring in my direction, and like making these eyes, like I don't remember what he did, but he did something with his eyes. And I was thinking, is he looking in my direction or is he looking at somebody else? Because it wasn't a queer bar, and I had no intention of going there to pick up any dates. I figured I'm going here to watch a band play and socialize and leave. And you don't pick up gays in a straight bar or whatever it was. But he kept looking, so I figured that guy keeps staring over here, but I didn't do anything about it. Like I didn't say anything. But eventually, somehow, it ended up right near where I was and started to talk, and sure enough, it was flirting. It was flirting and being friendly and talking, and we had the usual small talk, and he said something that he was like a dancer, a ballet dancer, and that sparked my attention because even though I wasn't there to pick up a date, he was telling me that, and I have a thing for muscular legs on a guy, so I said, "Oh, you're a dancer? So you must have muscular thighs and legs." And we chatted, and then he gave me his phone number, and I thought, wow, I didn't plan, because I learned over time, don't go to a nightclub with the idea of thinking you're going to find somebody to date because you're usually let down. So I eventually learned, you know what, I'm going out to watch a band play, socialize, and that's it. And if you set yourself up that way, you don't have to worry about the disappointment that occurs as if you're showing up there thinking, I'm going to find someone tonight. Because, first off, the bar is not the best place to find anybody. I've learned that as well. But anyway, we talked, and he told me he was a dancer, but then, of course, the punchline came in, which seemed to always be the case, because I was all excited, thinking, wow, a dancer, wow, this is great. And then, of course, he told me, oh, well, I'm moving in so many weeks. Yeah, I'm going away to some dance place, dance school or something. So I thought, great, I meet somebody new, and they're leaving. And it seemed to always work out that way throughout my history. If I met somebody interesting, it wouldn't be long before they'd announce, oh, by the way, I'm leaving. But it's just, who knows what's responsible for that. But I figured, well, it's not for a few weeks away, so... And then one night, I had my friend I hung out with, and he had his friend he hung out with. We all went out somewhere together and just had a fun time. And it seemed fine and great. But after all this, he was telling me, and I'm making up the dates because I don't remember the exact dates, but he was saying something like, oh, well, on the first of the month, I've got to move to this other state, which we won't mention names or states, but it was a different state. And I was thinking, okay, on the first, which was like 4 or 5 weeks away. So I figured, okay, well, and I was kind of like saying, well, then what's going on here? And he would say, like, well, we at least have this time now. And I figured, well, that makes sense. Okay, well, yeah, all right, we do. So I wasn't going to be like, I'm not going to see you anymore because you're moving. But then later I enjoyed the time I had with the person, but I didn't mention this part. The first the first night that we met and talked and chatted and exchanged phone numbers, but I went before I left, I gave him a hug. And when I did, I'm a person that likes the olfactory sense. And like if I pass by a pretty girl or a pretty boy or anything, I'll always sniff the air in just to, like if I, well, in this case, when I got the hug, I smelled something offensive. It was, friends of mine and I have come up with this term to explain it, but cute face, cute boy, cute body. I even felt the thighs through the pants, and they were nice. And yet, when I hugged the person, I smelled the scent of, I think of McDonald's, mustard, ketchup, pickle, onion stench. And that, to me, is a total turn-off. And so here I am thinking, oh, wow, I've got this dancer here who wants to meet. Oh, and I sniffed it, and I thought, oh, maybe he's just dirty tonight. And something like that always happens, where everything seems perfect, but then something yucky comes in. But I figured, well, it's one night, big deal. And I figured everything else made up for it because he was nice. Well, eventually we got together again, and I don't think I noticed the smell again right away, but I started to enjoy our conversations, enjoy our time together, so I came up with this idea. I said, hey, I got a proposal for you. I said, why don't you, because his parents were like strict, they didn't like his lifestyle, so he kept it from them that he was gay. So when I called his house, I had to like hang up if they answered. It was just strange. But I said, well, why don't you just tell your parents you're leaving on some other day, and on the 1st, since you don't have to start school or work till the 10th, I said, why don't you just stay with me a few days so we can at least have some quality time together, and then you can just go on to the other state. I didn't know if he'd go for this, but it was just an idea because I lived alone in a nice apartment overlooking the city, and it was nice, and he did it. So he showed up. So he agreed to tell his parents he was leaving for the trip to move like 10 days prior or something like that. And he came and brought a suitcase to my place, and I thought, this is great. But of course I had to work. So I would be, and this, of course, in today's day and age, is probably, or was probably, a dangerous thing, because I could have come home to an empty apartment, stripped of this, stripped of that, cat gone, killed, or whatever. But I was younger then, like 20-something. But anyway, so, but what would happen, for example, would be the first night, it's like I have to work, so I thought you could come here and stay and go shopping, do what you want throughout the day, and then we'll have the evening together. And he went along with it. So that night I was like calling, so what do you want for dinner tonight? And he's like, I've got it taken care of. And he was very creative. He went through my refrigerator, my cabinets, my kitchen, and he put together a bunch of things that I would never have thought to have put together for a meal, but he did. And I thought it was darling and sweet when I showed up, and it's like, here's your dinner, and I noticed all the stuff I had that was like pieced together in different ways that I normally don't put them together with, but I thought, well, that's creative and interesting. So we had the food, and it was nice. So I figured, well, this is kind of sweet. But I knew it was fake. I knew he was leaving, so I just figured, well, enjoy it while it's here, and then go back to whatever you were doing before. So this went on for a few days, and of course this person was like saying things like, oh, I really like you. When I move, I still want to see you. Oh, when I move, I'm going to send you a plane ticket. I want you to come visit me. And I thought, this all sounds great. Wow. He really wants me to visit him. At the same time, though, I know how long-distance relationships work. when you're with the person now, sure, you have the biggest plans in the world ahead of you, but then when you actually split and you get into your new life, many times things change drastically, which I was aware of all this, so I just figured, okay, you believe in those? All right. So sure enough, a few weeks after he moved, which we'd call each other on the phone, this is before the days of cell phones, and he would say, oh, after my next paycheck, I'm going to buy you a ticket. And he did. He actually sent me a plane ticket through the mail to my apartment, and I thought, wow, this guy's legitimate, sure. So I was overjoyed, thinking, well, I don't ever see this person, but I'm going on a trip. So I got on the plane, met him, went to his place. He had just gotten a puppy, a little tiny puppy dog, and we went to the beach and did all kinds of stuff, and it just seemed sweet and nice, but at the same time, the back of my mind was like, this isn't going to go anywhere. I don't live in this state. I'm visiting, but I, again, tried to make the most of it. So then he had to work. So he would leave work, and I'd be in his apartment alone. So I was bored in there, so I started just looking around the place. And I found in the cabinet, or no, the drawer, I found some man's phone number, and I picked up his phone and called it, and I didn't know who it was. I didn't have a clue. But then one night, we went to go see Boogie Nights at the theater, and it just kind of felt strange. And then he told me about his friends, and I got to meet his people he danced with in the dance troupe, or whatever they call it. And I just had this strange feeling that something fishy was going on. There was this real cute guy there, and he would tell me, oh, that guy's got zits all over his back. And today I've learned, well, that probably means they're dating, and he's saying that, so I won't know. Because I understand, if you're in a new city and that's your new place, you're probably going to adapt to your surroundings, and yet he had me there, which was one that he had met previously, and I knew all this, but the problem is with gays, a lot of times, they're so insecure, they won't discuss what's going on. They won't say, oh, well, I kind of met someone new. Plus, we went to this couple's house, which seemed fishy, because they had a dog there, but they were, like, cleaning up fur every time the dog walked by, and it seemed artificial, like it was all some kind of setup. Like, he probably told them something like, oh, this guy I met in this other city, well, he's going to come visit. So it seemed like everybody was putting on some kind of act. Which, again, I didn't really know it was, but I had this intuition feeling I developed, probably from my experience with the wonderful Cluster B people, which means they do serve a purpose. But it just all kind of felt weird. Plus, that smell, that mustard, McDonald's ketchup, pickle, onion, I smelled it again, so I figured, you know what? He looks great, perfect shape, but that smell. I figured I'll be romantic about this. I said, hey, before we do anything, why don't we go take a shower together? And so I took a bunch of soap and the loofah and was like scrubbing him everywhere thinking, get that stench off. Well, I'm guessing now that possibly he is one of those people that have what I've seen called rotting fish syndrome, which means no matter how much you scrub, no matter how much you clean yourself, the stench is there. I've seen news stories about such things, which he never talked about. I didn't say anything either because that's rude. I just figured, well, I'll just be romantic and scrub it away, but it was still there, so I don't know. But then I found that strange number, and it just kind of, everything kind of felt weird. Like, I thought, I'm in the wrong place here. He's rotting fish syndrome, and he's got his other people here now that he's settling in with, and I kind of felt like I didn't really belong. But we went through with it was like a weekend or something, and then he went to the airport, and he was hugging and saying goodbye, and then disappeared. I took the plane home, and guess what? After this particular week, oh, I forgot. He had this thing on his refrigerator. It was some kind of, like, alphabet, and I arranged the letters to ask something like, well, who is John Smith, or whatever the name was on that thing I saw in the drawer. But I left that there just to show that I was a spy. But there's nothing else to do in there. But Anyway, I never heard from the person again. There was no discussion of, oh, we're through. There was no discussion of anything. I don't know if it was a combination of me feeling that something was fishy or not, but the point of the story is when you meet somebody like that, like, for example, in the bar at the beginning, I thought, wow, he thinks I'm pretty and he's staring. I later figured I bet he uses that same look on other people because people tend to follow the same. He probably uses that stare on multiple people. Plus, he had that stench he never addressed. Plus, he had these friends that seemed to behave strangely because normally if you have a dog in your house, you don't chase after it everywhere it goes and sweep up its fur. It seemed like it was placed there for, I don't even know why. It just was all a big mystery. And I never heard from it again. I used to call a few times, and to me it wasn't that big a deal because I knew what was up. It's like we're in different states. We barely knew each other. We had a great week, but I learned to be realistic. But because you can't tell with these people, they'll act like they're in love with you forever, and then they vanish. And so it was no huge deal, but I just thought it was an interesting cautionary tale for those of you out there. If you find someone like this, doesn't mean to be scared of them and run away. It just means be aware that things like this do happen. Where they do act like they want to see you all the time, like with the plane ticket and all that, and then later they're distant. Things change, and they're afraid to tell you, and it's just, you have to do guesswork on your own. You're never going to necessarily get the exact story. All you need to know is that this isn't going to work out, and move along.
You want to see nudity? Well, we will show you nudity.